that was Wirbel by Katharina Klement. Born in 1963 in Graz, she started as a pianist and as a composer, and currently identifies herself as a composer-performer in the field of notated and improvised electronic and instrumental music, focusing on spatial concepts, cross-linking projects in the area of music, text, video performance, numerous multi-channel compositions in combination with instruments and voices. She has won numerous prizes and grants, including the Max Brandt Prize in 1994, the Publicity Prize of the SKE Astromechana in 2001, State Grant for Composition in 2002 and 2012, Advancement Award of the City of Vienna in 2002, and the honorary mention at the Prix Ars Electronica in Linz in 2006. Since 2006, Katharina has been teaching in the Computer Music and Electronic Media course at the University for Music and Performing Arts in Vienna. Katharina has received composition commissions from ORF, Jeunesse Klangforum Wien, Chamber Orchestra Vienna, Institute for Media Archaeology Austria, Airborne Extended Ensemble, Musikprotokoll Graz, Essel Collection, Klosterneuburg, and many other acclaimed institutions and ensembles. Katharina Klement, thank you very much for doing the interview. Wirbel, or Verba, I think it's in English, is the joints in the spiral column, as I understood correctly. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I mean, I think vortex is the Latin word, and also probably the English word. And yeah, the story behind this piece is that it is connected to a performance, a concert in a very famous Baroque church at the Kollegienkirche in Salzburg, where I was I think it was 2018, where I was invited to do a performance. There's a series there curated by Werner Radičnik, and I was invited to do there a performance with organ and with piano, because this is my instrument. And this was the first starting point for this piece. I mean, the whole performance was about, I think, 45 minutes, and this was the last part. And this version I sent you now, or which is the version here in this interview, I did a month ago, because I wanted to do an own acousmatic version of this. So I was combining and refining, combining it with other pieces, and refining the piece. Because of course there is no piano part and no organ part possible in this acousmatic version. And the story was that I was many years ago very fascinated about a book of Gilles Deleuze, which is called The Fold. And it's a very well-known book, and it deals also with the Baroque idea of the fold. I'm sure that I didn't understand the whole book, but I was thinking about this fold, and Deleuze describes that the fold is something elastic with many oscillating centers, and this is one of the main core ideas of the Baroque.
What do you mean by fold? Is it
I'm a fold, sure. Like when you're folding something, a paper, or folding,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he writes that the fold is this, is one of the main ideas of the Baroque space, of the development of the perspective, or this infinite space, probably, And when you are in a Baroque church like the Kollegienkirche, you are aware of that, of this immense space. And so this was my starting point for this piece. to deal with this idea of the fold of this oscillating centers, and then this idea of this wirbel, of this vortex came up. Yeah.
Now I'm curious because it's such a lovely name. Do your pieces usually have such relations with their names? Do you usually have like a place which is significant for the piece, or like the acoustical concept, as you said, like here, which makes the name relevant? So how do you generally choose the names for your pieces?
There is no general rule, of course. This was occasionally in this in this case, because the whole performance then, it was called a wirbel, because I think it fit very well to this immense Baroque church, as I said before. Well, names for pieces are always sometimes they are immediately here, and sometimes I'm looking for a long time for the right title or name. Sometimes this is really difficult to find it.
Yes, exactly. As a composer, it's always also interesting for me to see how people are naming their pieces, and it says a lot about them for me. It's a little bit like judging a book by its cover, but sometimes there's something special about it. That's why I'm always curious to know how are people choosing it. And can you explain what happens in the piece? It seems that it starts with these sine tones getting higher and gaining more colors, if I may say so, or vibrations or substance. How is it developed, or what happens in it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I choose the piece because I always say my sound material is between the simplest waveform, a sinus wave without any overtones, and noise, which would be the most complex sound for me. And so I think this piece is very close to that idea. It starts with this simple sine wave, which is already, this sine wave is already connected to the organ, or was connected in this church to the organ, and I really love organ because it's also like a synthesizer, and it has this very pure tone, sometimes like a synthesizer, like a sine wave. And actually, in the live performance, the organ starts more or less with the same tone up in the space, because the organ of course is upstairs, and the loudspeakers were downstairs. So it was a spatial connection. And then slowly the sine wave starts to move in pitch. So and these kind of beating frequencies start, so that you have this very nice what music does itself, it's an acoustic phenomenon, that when you're very close, when you have frequencies very close, they start to make a rhythm or to beat each other. And slowly, they start then. In this version, I started to connect it with another piece, to overlay it with another piece, where glissandi is the main compositional idea. That means moving in space, up and down. And the idea, of course, is that you lose a certain sense of gravity, so that you really have... sorry, my mail program is open. So I try to combine... Okay, sorry. I tried to combine these glissandi, as I said before, this moving upwards and downwards, so you lose a bit your gravity center. And then another phenomenon, which is easily done because it's a plug-in, I used this kind of Doppler effect, yeah. And what the Doppler effect does is actually not so simple, but it also moves an object in the space, and it moves the amplitude and also the pitch. So I started to use this Doppler effect, on the sine wave, but also starting with sounds with a richer spectrum, more noise, and it's getting more and more noisy. And having more noise is also having more noisy sounds gives you also always another relation to space. Because when you just have a sine wave, you can't say where it comes from so easily. But if you have more a richer spectrum, of course you can find out better where is the source of the sound. And in this piece, it gets more and more. Also this Doppler effect, this movement in space gets more and more faster. And of course, it's Wirbel is a vortex is for me really something at the end very fast, kind of turbulent movement, and I tried to do it with sounds. And I did this version because I was invited a few weeks ago to an acousmatic festival in St. Petersburg in Russia. And I did this new version because I was aware to have an acousmonium, that means a whole orchestra of loudspeakers. We had 32 loudspeakers there in St. Petersburg. And it was really, I think, a very nice, also after all this period without any concerts in space, only online. It was this great sensation to have, to deal with space in an acousmonium. That means putting the volume wherever you want to all these many loudspeakers. And this is only possible in a space where you really have these many loudspeakers. And many people asked me at the end if it was a multi-channel piece, and I said no, it's just a stereo, and but it's a sign that the movement in space gives a sensation as if it would be
from somewhere else,
multi-channel.
Yeah. Well, space generally is a very important factor in electroacoustic music, especially. And when you go to different rooms, I mean, you have this tape piece, for example, and it sounds very different in different spaces. How do you try to not get surprised or make your pieces compatible in different spaces, or do you know already in which place are these pieces going to be performed and can be performable, and what is your relationship to choosing the space and making a piece performable in that space?
Yeah, I mean, space is one of the main parameters or characters of making music in general. And I'm very happy that these spaces are changing, first of all. So I would say it's always good to find out different performance spaces. And of course, if I would play the piece somewhere else in a smaller space, it will sound different, of course, and that's very nice because that's a parameter about performance. And of course, in a certain way, space is already written down in this piece. So I'm always, or as we know, that it's a crash of different spaces always when you're doing a performance. On the one hand, you have already a space which is written down in especially in electroacoustic music, where you already have the fixed media sound. You just can change I would say, yeah, the volume, of course, sometimes you can change slightly with filtering sound. For example, if a performance place is very sharp or is gives a lot response of high frequencies. I did that in St. Petersburg, I remember. So, but this is just a slight change you can do. So I would say that space is the last instrument for every performance, for every musical performance.
You used the term Überschreibung or overriding in English. Does that have anything to do with this specific composition?
Yes, I mentioned that because, as I said before, I started the first version in 2018, and now I did a second version into this year, 2021. And I have to say, I realize that also in other pieces, I'm doing different or many versions of one piece. And I think it says something about my approach of being an improviser, a performer, and adapting pieces for certain occasions. That's why, because also other pieces I'm sometimes using some ideas, let's say ideas or first versions for a performance. I'm improvising with that because I'm on myself on stage. Next time, maybe somebody else will perform that, so I have to do it. I have to change it a little bit because it's, of course, somebody else has another vocabulary, or especially when it's for piano, for example, because I'm a pianist and I'm having my own vocabulary, I'm having my own preparations. But when I'm doing a piece for piano for another pianist, I have to do it in another way because not everybody has the same preparations or the same access to the piano as I have. This is maybe much better understandable. So, yeah.
So you it's kind of you modify this one piece for different occasions, as you said, even spaces or instruments, and that's what overriding is actually, right?
Yeah, this is one approach. Because and the other approach is this, making a composition. That means you have to define everything very precise. If you put it in somebody other hands, or if you have the approach that you have just material for an improvisation, yeah. So you can keep it much more open, and I think this is my more and more. I'm working the last years like this, in between these two areas, yeah.
Well, you identified yourself as an improviser and also said that that's also what you do often. And now I'm curious to know, what role does improvisation play in your compositions? Do your compositions usually start with improvising? Is that a part of the process?
Yeah, this question. I'm there are so many answers to these questions. Question, I think composition and improvisation are very different areas, but of course they are communicating. That means for me, when I'm doing a composition, normally I don't start with an improvisation, because composition for me is really thinking about structure, thinking about very precise rules and about systems, also sometimes with mathematical structures. And I love that a lot. And of course, that's the reason why I'm a composer. Sometimes, of course, I'm I'm thinking of improvisations I have in mind where I realized, that sounded very good. But I often realized it doesn't work to write, to want to make how to say, a transcription of an improvisation. It For me it didn't worked very well to transcribe an improvisation and make a composition about that. This is not the way for me how it works. The other way maybe works much better, to have some compositional ideas in mind and then put it like an idea into an improvisation.
So, in what settings do you usually improvise? Like, what does improvisation mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm a performer with piano, with prepared piano, with using also electronics, and since a few years I'm also using the zither as a sound generator. There is, on the one hand, this concept of structured improvisation. Sometimes I have partners or a duo where we really have a very clear structure, but in between this structure we have freedom, we have improvisation. And on the other hand, I have groups or also partners, duos, where I really go on stage without having any rules. Going on stage and playing free, whatever that means, because everybody of us has developed a certain vocabulary, but going on stage without any agreements about structure. And if it works, if you have a good improvisation, I have to say the best thing is when things are happening where you at the end think, wow, I've never would have thought about that. That means that some musical things are developing by itself, coming out without thinking about it before. And this is something what improvisation can do, or what is possible in an improvisation. And sometimes it's so complex, it's much more complex sometimes than a composition. So and vice versa. I think with doing composition, you can do so many complex or structured things. You never could do that in an improvisation. So these are really different fields, different areas for me.
Well, I'm curious to know, as an audience, because I personally I'm not a fan of improvising, because exactly I can't follow the form. So I might do it for myself, but I never was able to connect with other people to do it in a manner that I would like to present it on a stage. So I'm wondering, as an audience, like when you go to a concert and you hear an improvisation, what does that mean to you? How can you enjoy that, or how should it sound like, so that you would say, "Oh, I'm enjoying this"?
Yeah, that's a good question. Last week, or just a few days ago, I was in Graz at the V&M festival with many nice, mainly improvised concerts. And one concert I remember very well was a composition, also with improvisation inside. But the difference I realized was, if you're witnessing a process like an improvisation does, which is really created in the moment, you have another role in the audience, because you're really connected completely with this moment. You're really looking into the pot where the soup is cooking, yeah. And when you're listening to a compositional process, you have another role in the audience, yeah. It's, of course, it's it's this narrative concept. It's another concept of time.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's what I'm also often that what's what makes me sometimes not to be able to connect to an improvisation, because the feeling of time is very different. I mean, when people are communicating with each other, that definitely has another effect. But with a composition, you have like put everything in place in an amount of time, and exactly when it's an improvisation, I don't know how to follow that. But I kind of understand what you mean. I mean, the feeling that I know that something's just happening is just live television, for example. The difference between maybe a film and a live television, you never know what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
in a
and
sense.
you can realize, oh, this is such a good reaction. For example, somebody plays this note and somebody picks it up, and you say, oh, that's so nice. And now a new possibility is opened now for the other one who can put another sound now. And so if you're, of course, it's not something where you just can sit down and say, oh, okay, let's show what they will present. I think you really have, like in every piece of music, you should be very aware of what is happening now. And yeah, that's what I already said. You can witness this moment, what is possible in a moment. And yeah, and of course, it's much more individual. The musicians, these improvisation musicians, they are working for years, for their whole life, on their own vocabulary of sounds, and it's so fascinating to be able to listen to these different individual sounds, vocabularies they are developing.
Well, especially now that everyone has a computer and an audio editing device, well, the process doesn't take long like when people used to work with tape. People have unlimited possibilities in the electroacoustic field, especially plugins, features, audio effects. And this makes it harder to choose sometimes. And one gets so distracted by the possibilities that it's hard to stay focused. Do you ever have such problems, or do you ever get like overwhelmed by the possibilities?
Yes and no. I know exactly what you mean. Of course, we have so many possibilities at the moment. But on the other hand, I think maybe we don't have so many possibilities in reality, because you are always confined in your aesthetical view, in your whatever you have in your mind, in your head. And that's maybe not bad, that you are not able to think to all possibilities you have. And because I'm not so much a person who is so equipped with a high technical knowledge, maybe I'm not so interested in having all this technical knowledge, which I probably should have. I'm already limited. That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, I always think, oh, I should know this software, and if I would know this software, then I would have this possibility, and then I could do this and that. But at the end, I think, okay, I'm limited with that what I have with this software. I already know, and maybe this is just an excuse. But on the other hand, it's also good to have a certain limited access to whatever you do.
I definitely understand it, because like for me personally also, it's overwhelming that there are 88 keys on the piano. It's too much, so I always have to pick up 4, and I just need to work with those. It's really a lot. And in the electroacoustic fields, the color adds to the factor, and also that makes it also hard to just pick something.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. You have these 88 keys, and we have that since, I don't know, 200 already, at least 200 years. And before we only had maybe 30 or 35 keys. But and I'm sometimes asking myself, oh my dear, you're still dealing with the piano. It's really gone, the period of the piano. But at the end, because I'm so in love with the piano, I think you still can deal with this instrument because you still can put it in the contemporary context. And if you try to do it, this is a big challenge. Also, if you still use the same technology of this piano as it is, and I think that's, at least for me, maybe more challenging than working with the brand new technology, which is, yeah, I mean, it's maybe also very exciting to have all these new technologies. And in music, what happened in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, the access to the music material changed so much, and it's so fascinating for me. And yeah, I wish I could, I would have much more technical knowledge, I have to say.
Well, now I'm curious to know. Well, you do compose for acoustic instruments like piano and organ, but you decided to be an electroacoustic composer, and I'm interested. How come you got into the synthetic world of sounds versus the acoustic ones?
Well, I mean, in my biography, it started all with coming into a studio, and somebody asked me to make a recording on the piano, with the piano. And I was waiting for hours and ages until the whole cables were fit together. And but at the end, I was so fascinated what was able with the sound itself. The sound, of course, there's such a different approach of the material of sound in the electroacoustic world. Yeah, you are completely free from an instrumental excess. Sound becomes a matter, and you can put all the sounds you like. You can put a piano note, and you can put the sound of of an escalator together with whatever. So this other aesthetic approach was fascinating for me. And also this what you can do, the transformation with sound, and that you can sit in the studio in front of the loudspeakers, and you are able to listen to this sound and working like a fine artist a little bit on these transformations. And you say, no, not this way, no, I have to try this. So you are really completely in a one-to-one process.
This brings me actually to the next question, because when one's composing for an instrument, there's a middleman who plays that instrument, and through that person we can hear the result of the composition. And with the electroacoustic music, you don't really have that middleman. You can directly hear what you're composing. So what is your approach towards instrumental composition when you have to work with the musician?
Yeah, sure. This is the biggest difference. You mentioned it already, which is very difficult sometimes. And on the other hand, this is the best thing what can happen on the other hand, because you need the musician, somebody who is able to play the instrument, and who is able to realize the ideas you had in mind. And as we all know, there is a big deal of how to transfer your ideas to a musician. And in most of the cases, I write it down. So it's a decoding process. And also, if you know a musician very well, you really know how he or she treats the instrument, and if it is a solo piece, for example, you really can write it with the person. Yeah, and sometimes it's really very hard if you because you have to think in this abstract way. When you have an ensemble, you have to think about flute, violin, or whatever. And these are very abstract parameters, of course. Yeah. So I really prefer having knowing who will play my piece and working very close together with the person. This is the best process.
Yes, of course, I understand because you're dependent on the sound catalog that each individual musician has to offer. And they each have their own spectrum of things that they can do under instrument.
Yes, and they are already so good. All these musicians playing contemporary music, so they have often a vocabulary you don't know. You will not find it somewhere written in a book or somewhere. And yeah,
You also teach in a more experimental department at the university, in which students are not necessarily from a musical background. They might not be familiar with classical notation necessarily, and they're more creative, so to say. So, how do you try to help them to find a way to convey their thoughts and ideas to the musicians? Because they might not be able to use that classical notation systems that are usual in music.
yeah. Most of my students they don't have at all this instrumental approach. They're coming from the electronic sounds, whatever that means, from very different aesthetic contexts. And I mean, I try to take them, to catch them, to understand where they are coming from, and what they are used to hear, and trying to communicate on that, because I never want to be too overwhelming to say you have to do this and that. So it's always a learning process also for me, because I know I have a very different most of the time I have a very different attitude, or my uh, I'm another generation, of course. And it's very interesting also when I'm in the it's called Praktikum Komposition, and it's always a small group of students and me. And when we are listening to a piece or to a sketch, and then I try to say what I think, and then also the other students, I invite them to tell what they are listening and what they are thinking, and sometimes they are able to hear very different things. So what we are able to hear is always something, what we are able to be aware of something. So and there are so many different approaches to what you can hear. And in teaching music, I think it's also my job to speak about a piece, or to tell the whole context of music. Because as we all know, if you know that, for example, Xenakis did a piece connected to an architecture, and that the rules of this architecture is mirroring in a piece of music, then you say, oh, wow, if I know that, I will listen very differently to this piece of music. So if I know from a student that this piece is made for a certain occasion, I will listen to it in a different way. So, yeah, exactly.
Well, this brings me to the next question. There are two approaches towards composition at the university. One is the classical composition style, and one is ELAC, which is a non-degree program in which you teach. How do you find the outcome of these two systems as a teacher? Do you think one of these systems or a mixture of these systems would be a successful one in supporting the creativity and innovation of the students? I'm just curious to know your opinion on this.
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't like to make values about what is more successful or what is more worth to do. I think these are very different systems. That's as far as I understood your question, or as far as I know about this system, you have this category of the instrumental approach of instrumental composition, or at least at the university in Vienna, it is more or less like this. And in the course where I'm teaching, this is the ELAC, which is only for 3 years, so it's not so many years. And the whole aesthetics is, I would say much more wide, maybe it's better to speak about a vision. And my vision, or I think also already the reality in festivals for contemporary music, is that it really is mixing together this electroacoustic approach, this sense, as I said before, of that sound is a matter. But you also can treat sound as a matter coming from the instrumental approach. And and then it's also a big deal how to combine this. What is a score? What can be written down? What shouldn't be written down? What is better to improvise? What is better to make it very clear? And I think these are very big questions in the contemporary composition.
The reason I'm asking is that I personally studied the classical one. And in that studies, a major part of the first part of the studies especially was dedicated to learning how to write the motets of 17th century and studying what was done in the past. After becoming more informed about the other studies and getting more contact with the students at ELAC, I realized, okay, although they're not educated in the classical manner, they can still communicate their ideas with the musicians. And in the concerts, they have somehow more innovative ideas because they don't necessarily see sound as music, but more as a color. So they don't think really piano or violin. They think in a more open way. And I was just always wondering if one of these systems is a more functional one.
I mean, I also studied composition at the Universität in the Wiener, and I know what you mean. And I think, I did, fortunately, I did the studies in Tonsatz and harmony at the same time doing this ELAC course. So this was very, very good for me, because I think just doing these harmony studies and looking backward to the history of music is really not good, because you have always to as a composer, and when you are young and when you are studying composition, you have to do composition. This should be the main issue in studies, and this is really something I want. These discussions are really, I don't know, so old, and I can't understand why. Because also, if an artist students come to an artist university, he or she wants to make art, yeah, and this has to be the same with music. Of course, you have to do your music, and also my students, we just have 3 years, which is not a lot, but I say you have to do at least every semester one concert. This has to happen, because this is the making a performance, making a concert, and making a sound installation, whatever. But you have to do that because it is much more. Yeah, this is much more than doing a test or whatever, or an exercise, because this is reality, or this is the challenge you have, and you have to deal with that, and you have to learn to do that. This is much more important than doing your scales every day, or how you name it.
The final question is that, well, I assume you're a known composer. You have your pieces played in various festivals and occasions. Do you have any tips for those trying to make their way in the field? Anything noteworthy?
Yeah, it's maybe something is one very important thing is that you have to trust on your own yourself, and don't try to adapt your pieces to some things which are modern or en vogue. I think this is one of the most important things, that you try to keep on your style, and don't try to make something just to be played somewhere. And because I know it from my own experience, you realize very soon, they are playing these pieces and these pieces. Maybe I should change my style, and then my piece will play as well. Some thoughts or ideas like that are very stupid. So this is one thing, one idea. Yeah, and the other thing is that you have to keep, you have to organize your artistic life very well. You have to make a lot of pressure, as we know, that your work goes on and that your work is played. It's not easy, and yeah, as we know, also for women, it's, I think, still not easy and not at all, normal that we have the same environment, or the same self consciousness, maybe. So these are very general ideas.
Still, I think they're very interesting nonetheless. And Katharina, thank you very much for the interview.